Hi, Mordy. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you. Yourself?
Not too bad. Can't complain.
Good, good. Has the week all been good?
I'm sorry?
Has the week all been okay?
Yeah. So far, so good. Yourself?
Good. Cold, but good.
Mm. I live in the desert. I don't have that problem, but I miss the cold.
Lucky for you. It's getting a bit colder now. So, yeah, getting the heating on and trying to warm up a little bit. But have you got much planned for the rest of the week?
Tomorrow's my last work day of the week, and no, just the grind.
Always, always. What time is it for you now? It's
It's
a little bit
two,
later on, isn't it?
2 o'clock in the afternoon. So perfect timing.
Oh, cool. Good timing. Good
Yeah.
timing. Perfect. Well, I've been looking forward to having the discussion all week, really. So, yeah, obviously, just talking a little bit about Google algorithm updates, how seriously we should take them, and just a bit of an overview of what's happened in 2022 and plans for 2023.
Sounds great. Love the topic.
Perfect. So do I. So, yeah, we'll get straight into it then. So, for the first question we've got, it's just really for those who don't know, what is the significance of a Google algorithm update?
Well, I guess at worst case scenario or best case scenario, depending on what happens, you can either lose a tremendous amount of your rankings for important keywords that bring traffic and therefore possibly revenue to your website, or you can see an enormous increase in rankings and therefore traffic and therefore revenue to your website.
Yeah, exactly. Spot on. So, yeah, just a little bit of an overview of the algorithm updates. Obviously, that's Google tweaking sort of how their algorithm works. So, depending on what the algorithm's based on, that could be anything. And as Mordy was saying, it just can either have a positive impact on the website or a negative impact, depending on how the website is coping with the changes that Google are making. So, yeah, spot on there. And then just leading nicely into the next question, which is what algorithm updates have Google rolled out this year?
Oh boy, a bunch. There's been multiple product review updates. So that's an algorithm that goes after, I think, goes after affiliates, but what it officially does is it goes after product review pages. So you have a page that talks about the best microwaves, and you've seen this in all over the web, where as opposed to actually offering you information as to which microwave might be the best purchase, it's basically a way for an affiliate to stuff in a bunch of links and get you to earn them some money. So Google has algorithm that was launched, I think, initially in April of 2021. I'm terrible with times and dates, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Yeah.
And it basically aims at improving these product review pages. So Google launched a whole bunch of those in 2022. I think there was one in March. There's one in March. There's one in July. Then there's one recently at the end of September,
Yeah.
and there might have been one in between that I'm missing, but I think those were three of those, and those were kind of interesting. The initial one in earlier in the year, I think in March, that one was pretty significant. The other one, the rollout was just different. Not to say that it wasn't significant. It definitely, the pages that it definitely hit those pages. But broadly speaking, it wasn't as large as the previous versions of it, and that was just a lot of weird stuff and going on with the algorithm that on that end. And then there was, let's see, there's helpful content update, obviously,
Yep.
and then
We
there
all know
was,
about that.
yeah, well, I'm sure we're going to talk about that one. And then there was a couple of core updates. We had one in May of 2022, and then there was one recently in September of 2022. I don't think I'm missing any there. But if
Yeah.
you're, by the way, if you're looking, Google themselves now keeps an official list. But prior to this, software companies like Moz or SEMrush would keep a list of this. But Google has an official list now. You can just search for, I guess Google update official list, and they'll list the official updates they put out there.
Yeah, exactly. I think the only other two that I can briefly remember was I think at the very beginning of the year, I think February or something around those lines. It was the desktop page
Oh,
experience
right. I always
update.
forget that. They were
That
right. Core Web Vitals, or the page experience, being more technical, went live on desktop.
that was it.
Right, and then there was a couple of spam updates somewhere towards over the summer. There was one. I think there's one very recently in October as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think so the spam ones are normally affect sort of they're global, so I think they affect all languages, and then obviously depending on what other updates, sometimes not global and will just affect certain languages. But yeah, perfect there, a perfect overview of sort of all of the ones I've had quite a lot this year. So yeah, it's a good sort of summary of the ones that we've had. And as you expected, next question leading straight into the helpful content update. So, um, was the helpful content update as big as people expected?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. I guess the easy answer is no, right? The way that it
Yeah,
came across, and that's a whole story in its own right, was this was going to be Armageddon, which I guess is how we always present updates. But this time it was a little bit different. The news outlets and reputable sources like Gabe and Barry Schwartz were talking about this as being like Panda level, and
yeah,
in the end, it kind of wasn't. But that I don't think that doesn't mean that it's not impactful in a huge sense. Well, one is just directionally speaking what it means for the web, what Google's trying to do. I think that's huge in its own right. I don't think that when it's not necessarily the case that when Google launches a new update or a new type of update, and particularly when it's using machine learning to do so, the initial burst of volatility is going to be there, especially because it's machine learning. The way machine learning works, it's going to have to learn, reassess, recalibrate, go at it again. And you kind of saw this with like the core updates themselves. Like if you think back, if you ask, maybe I'm wrong, but I think if you venture to say, what's the first of those core updates? By the way, Google's been doing core updates forever, but in this era of core updates, we think back to the Medic update, which was in August of 2018. But really, the first one of those, of this new series of core updates, if you call them that, was in March of 2018. But the most powerful one didn't come until August. And that's very often that initial update is not the most powerful one. They have to refine, they have to recalibrate, they have to see what worked, what didn't work with it, and then go at it again. With the helpful content update, it's built on machine learning. So the thing has to learn. And I think as time goes on, we may not notice it because it's not going to be like, okay, we're pushing the button on helpful content update 2. It's constantly recalibrating, constantly reclassifying sites. So it's hard to pinpoint what that impact is going to be, much the way you would with, say, a core update or a product review update or so forth. But I think it's going to be big because I don't think they invested a ton into this for no reason. And I also think that the helpful content update solves some really big problems that they have on their hands and they can't live without it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I completely agree with that. In terms of, I think people thought maybe it was going to be instant impact, which isn't the case. But in the next sort of couple of months, years to come, we would likely expect sort of extensions of that update to be rolled out once the machine learning sort of understood what needs to be changed, and then we will start to see more progress with that. So I think it is actually an extremely big update, but it's just one of them ones that's a sort of slow rollout over time, not one that's within the sort of slow 2 weeks. You're going to see huge impacts. So yeah, completely agree, spot on with what you've said there. It leads us on to the next question, which is what is Google doing outside of algorithm updates with SERP changes?
So I think it's like one of the things that people don't focus enough on, right? Obviously, the updates are a big deal, but what happens on the SERP itself can greatly to a change on the SERP and the layout of the SERP, what's on the SERP, can significantly change your traffic just the way an update could. For example, one of the ones that I think we don't talk enough about, I call them. I don't know the official name. I don't think there is an official name. I call them top of the SERP bubble filters. So like you search for something like I don't know, like buy a book or buy jeans or go on best vacation spot. So it was a good one and you'll get a set of filters all the way at the top, and it'll say, uh, in the wintertime for kids with a family. And instead of going to that feature snippet that shows you the top vacation spots, it's a very broad kind of post or listicle.
Yeah.
You click on a filter. I've got kids. I'm not going to like Cancun.
Yeah.
So I want a vacation just suitable for the kids. So I click on that filter. So now all of that traffic that would have gone to the initial feature snippet is now being bypassed to one of these filter options, or theoretically to one of these filter options. So the changes that Google makes can have significant changes to your traffic depending upon what niche you're in. And there's a ton of refinement on the SERP. If you go there's broaden this search, there's refine this search, there's people also ask, people also search for all sorts of filters because Google knows that the way we're used to searching is for very broad terms. Like we'll search for best vacation spot, but we don't really mean that. I really mean best vacation spot with my kids. So Google knows that they have to point you in the right direction towards more specific information. So those kind of changes where the ecosystem itself is changing to get you from that top level query to more specific information to make you happier, those kind of things are a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the sort of changes that people, well, not always notice straight away, but they do have an extremely big impact on sites. And like you were saying, the site traffic coming through. And they've also done a couple of other things, sort of removed some tags that used to be relevant within sitemaps and unsupported tags as well. But in terms of SERPs, that's one thing that's noticed. They've also made some changes to the Google My Business as well over 2022 and sort of how they've been performing and tweaks to what you can add there as well. So yeah, been quite a few changes, and like I
Constantly
said,
changing.
yeah, exactly. And it's not all about the algorithm updates. Obviously, that's what we're mainly talking about today. But there's a lot of big changes that have happened and will continue to happen as well
Yeah.
over the coming years and moving forward. So yeah, brilliant answer there as well. Thank you very much. So the next question that we've got is, should we make any big changes to sites during an algorithm update?
I would say no, don't do that.
Yeah.
First off, updates reverse themselves. First off, an update itself can take anywhere from a few days or a few weeks to really fully impact your website, right? So it's very common that you'll see initially you're impacted one way by the update. By the time it's finished 2 or 3 weeks later, you've gone back to normal, or if you actually reverse and you instead of being down, you're actually up. So don't make any quick changes. And then even after you see, okay, first off, it's an official update, because when it's an unofficial update, meaning you're looking at one of the weather tools and you're seeing there's an update, you're seeing spike, whatever it is, a lot of the time those unofficial updates are, in my opinion, machine learning recalibrating. And there's another reversal and a reversal after that and a reversal after that. So look at the larger trend, especially on the unconfirmed updates. But even on the confirmed updates, it's a week after the update's been officially rolled out, you're still down. I wouldn't rush and I wouldn't make rash changes. You need to really sit back and think, like, what are the actual problems with the website? And that's not always easy to diagnose and figure out. And it's usually not just like one thing, like, oh, here's the one thing, I figured it out. I always quote Glenn Gabe about this. They'll throw the kitchen sink at it. There's multiple problems. There's multiple things you can fix. You never know what's going to stick. So don't rush just to make changes, but sit back, analyze, see what Google's changed. What are they rewarding they weren't rewarding before? Why might that be? What types of content? What types of websites? Has intent it shifted? Is Google looking for something different on websites than they weren't before? You really need to spend time and dig into it. So I wouldn't make any rash changes regardless.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Google's not always, 100% clear on everything that's being changed in an algorithm update as well, especially the broad core update. So, in terms of making changes while it's being rolled out, or sort of rash changes, sometimes it's either going to just waste time and not really have an impact, or it could even potentially have a negative impact when things are rolled back, like you were saying. So it's not always necessary. I do believe that it's best to, as well, after the algorithm updates rolled out, like you said, do your research and try to make changes sort of one at a time, not all at once, because if you're making loads of changes at once, it's hard to sort of actually identify what changes worked and what hasn't. So making them sort of one at a time and slowly rolling them out gives you sort of an idea of what changes are working, and then you can sort of roll that out on the rest of the site as well.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, perfect. So the next question that we have is, do site owners need to panic about Google updates as much as they did in the days of sort of Panda and Penguin?
I would say no. I mean, in general, like, don't panic. Is that going to, even if you are in a problematic situation, panicking is not going to help you. But
Yeah.
no, I don't, I don't think it's necessarily the same thing. Penguin back in the day, you had to wait for who knows when to get reversed, but when they released the next version of it, which could have been a year later. The core updates are more frequent, so you'll have usually 2 or 3 opportunities to be restored. So it's not the same kind of problem. They're not as huge as Panda, or as impactful as Panda. Panda was a whole different beast altogether. So as a rule, No. Not to say that you can't really get clobbered by one of these things, and it's not something to be concerned about.
No, exactly. Like I say, sometimes they'll have a bigger impact than others, but I do think that in general, algorithm updates are sort of more slowly rolled out now. In terms of, it might be a couple of similar updates that you start to see the effect. It's not going to be sort of one big change straight away from what we've seen sort of at least through the last sort of couple of years. So I wouldn't say there's any need to panic. Like you say, panicking never really helps anything anyway. But it's best to sort of just review the changes, sit down. There's things you can do as well. There's a lot of people that will be sort of tweeting about it, so it's good to follow sort of SEO experts, and obviously do your own research as well to get a bit of an understanding of what has changed. If you are seeing an impact, then reviewing it and seeing what you can do to resolve it, rather than panicking and, like I say, making rash decisions on the website, because yeah, that's never going to help really. So
yeah. Just to quickly add to that, some of the data I pulled from SEMrush shows that the core updates have been less powerful more recently over time. The standard deviation, meaning how drastic rank fluctuations are, so there are more days of rank fluctuation out there, but the extent of the dramatic nature of these fluctuations are less and less each year. I looked at some initial data in 2022 and even that's lower than 2021, which is way lower than 2020. So it looks like there might be more instances of rank volatility out there, but they're not as drastic as they used to be either.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so we've sort of answered this a little bit already, but how can users best prepare for Google algorithm updates?
I mean, one is like it's hard to say, obviously, but I would say it's more of a mindset than anything in particular, at least to me. You have to look at your website and really understand, like, what does it mean to target your audience, to write quality content? What does it mean to produce a quality website? What does that actually mean? What does it actually look like? And it's a whole bunch of things. Crystal Carter, who I work with over at Wix, her point is always that the technical health of the website is a quality signal. If you have a bunch of broken links, if your site is super slow, whatever it is, that tells Google, hey, you're not really taking care of it. So it's a multifaceted approach to showing that, yeah, we really care about what we're doing and what it means to create a quality website. You really need to think about what that actually means, what that actually looks like from the content point of view. I think we don't do as a rule as a web. I think Google's VP of Search said this on the SMX session recently. The quality of the web is not great. And I don't think we do enough to really. I have this thing, and it's a hot take, I guess, but I think that acquisitional content sort of ruins the web because we go a little bit too far with it, as opposed to really thinking what users need, what we can do to help them, and then thinking about, okay, how could I use this content in order to grab them into the net? We focus too much on grabbing them into the net, not creating that good content. So I would very much take a user first, quote unquote, approach. That'll generally work out well for you if you're empathizing with your audience, you're identifying with your audience, and you're creating content that aligns to their actual needs. It's pretty hard not to create something that's good.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, just to add on to that, I think a lot of algorithm updates are still about sort of doing the basics right. So the helpful content that's just come out and will continue to likely be released, it's all really comes down to sort of user experience and making sure that the correct searches are being shown in terms of user intent and bringing the right searches to what users are looking for. So stepping back and making sure you're doing all of that right. But similar to what we said earlier, not panicking and rushing and looking at all of the things Google have said that they're going to change in this algorithm update and trying to tweak the website, because I don't think that's the best way to prepare for it. It's all about, just like I said, make sure you're doing the basics right, and have the right mindset, exactly like you were saying, Mordy. So yeah, brilliant. And then in terms of moving on to the next one, we've got what actions should be taken in the aftermath of an update.
So yeah, and that goes back to, guess, what we were saying this whole time, right? So one of the things that you should look at is which area of the website were you hit on. In other words, you need to figure out what was Google going after. Where exactly was it? One particular folder? Was it a type of page? Certain kinds of keywords? Where is the problem? First, identify where the problem really is. It's not always okay. You've lost all of your rankings for all of your keywords. That's generally not how it works. You want to see where Google is seeing you as relevant and where they're not seeing you as relevant, and maybe dive into that. You also want to look at what's happening on the SERP itself, right? What kind of content was not being rewarded before that is being rewarded now? So keep track of the SERPs that are really important to you and know who's ranking where. And then you can see who flipped once the algorithm update finished rolling out, who started ranking better, and then thematically analyze why that happened. And then once you've kind of identified where the problem is and what the problem is, you really need to go back and think. And usually, again, Google has said it, fundamentally speaking, I'm not saying it can't be a technical issue, very much can be, but core updates are fundamentally about the quality of the content on the website. And I think you need to go back, and it's something we need to do a better job in general of, is think, what exactly does quality content mean here for this? It's going to look very, very different. For example, if you're creating quality content and you're writing for TMZ and you're talking about, OJ's latest and greatest versus you're creating content for a health website that's talking about thyroid cancer. What does it mean to create good content in either one of those situations? And fundamentally speaking, what do you need to do in order to show Google that you have a quality experience on your website? That's fundamentally what it comes down to. Obviously, the devil's in the details. What does it actually mean? How do you actually go about doing that?
Yeah, exactly. And just to add on to that, similar to what I said earlier, in terms of the aftermath, if it is something that you have been affected by, I would always recommend, like I say, to, as Mordy was saying, obviously look at it from a point of view of fundamentals, but also actioning one thing at a time is always what I would recommend. Like I say, just to make sure that you're not panicking about it. You've seen a drop off in certain rankings or a client's main term. It's quite easy to start, panicking and seeing what you can do. But at the end of the day, sort of changing things, sort of tweaking things one step at a time to actually get an understanding of what the issue is and where it's occurred is going to be much more beneficial than making loads of changes and potentially it working or potentially it not, and then not knowing what's caused what. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that as well. But as I say, completely agree with what you were saying there. So
yeah, and it could be really nuanced, by the way. I've seen cases where, especially in the YMYL, your money, your life industries, where particular keywords or particular phraseology that you're using can make a big deal. Like one case I saw back in the May 2022 core update was related to bipolar disorder. I forgot the name of the syndrome, but there's a debate in the medical community whether or not this particular syndrome is part of the bipolar disorder spectrum or not. And every major website, the WebMD, the Mayo Clinic, whatever it was very adamant about making sure that nuance was there. They'll say some doctors or a wide consensus of doctors say that this thing is part of the bipolar disorder spectrum. A pretty well-known site, got hit on these particular keywords because they lacked all nuance. They said, yeah, this disorder or this part of this I don't know what you want to call it, this syndrome is part of the bipolar disorder spectrum. And it was very apparent that Google knocked them off because that was not accurate. And it's a very small little change, but it's a big one.
Yeah, huge. No, very interesting. And I think as well, just to add on to that, a good way to do that is very simple, but just to look at your competitors and what Google has started ranking that wasn't previously ranking before. Helps you get an understanding of potentially the changes that it is preferring and leading preference to. And then that can obviously allow you to sort of tweak a site and improve it on what is being shown in the top positions, not copying it, but trying to improve upon it and getting an understanding of, like I say, what's being preferred that potentially may not have been before the algorithm update came out.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So yeah, just leading on to the next question. So what do you think is next for Google-based algorithms to be rolled out in 2023 and over the coming years?
So actually, there's word about this search engine watch. I think what's going to be happening is kind of what's been happening so far is that these major updates are, while whatever they do hit, very impactful, but their broad reach of them a little bit less. And it kind of makes sense to me. Like you have this core updates, the technology that Google's interjected to create this modern series of core updates. It's been implemented over and over and over and over again. The refinement that's there, it's going to be less impactful over time, mainly because Google's already, whatever it's been able to do, it's refined out for to a greater or larger extent. And what you're kind of seeing happening is there's a sort of like continuum of a continuous algorithm updates almost, and they're unofficial. A lot of them are reversals, but it's basically the machine learning. I'll put it like taking over. And as opposed to Google manually pushing the button, I think what's happening is we're dealing with what's basically less noticeable. Right? If you go to SEMrush, you look at the SEMrush sensor, you may not see this giant spike. But if you go to your actual keywords, you may see a lot of volatility going on. And it's a lot of continuous algorithmic changes over time. So less of these major update milestones and more of just the machine learning, recalibrating, doing new things, trying new things, Google saying, okay, let's roll with it, and then rolling it out, or just really just trusting the machine like they're doing with the helpful content update, right? That's a great example of this, or Penguin 4.0 is continuous. It's, again, the helpful content update again is the same sort of thing. It's a continuous sort of, it's constantly going. It's a set of machine learning that's constantly reevaluating content and making changes. I'll say in real time. I don't mean immediately. The helpful content update in particular takes a certain threshold of bad, unquality content, low quality content rather, to move the needle for them to reclassify your site. But it is sort of real time. It's happening constantly. It's a continuous algorithmic scenario, and I think that's what we're moving to, which is, I think it's better for everybody, right? What's the point? And from Google's point of view, what's the point of, okay, we implemented an algorithm update, we fixed it, or we fixed the web to whatever extent. Now we have to wait 6 more months in order to get the next batch. Like, that's not what they want either. They want it to be more real time. Some
Yeah.
of the initial data on 2022 that I've seen already kind of points to the same kind of thing. And I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, no, like I say, I agree. I think a lot of it's going to be about sort of user intent and, as you were saying, trying to make them a little bit more sort of machine learning. So, yeah, I think they're likely in the coming years, probably in 2023, there will be a couple of more extensions of the helpful content update. Like I say, whether they're sort of within sort of broader updates or their own separate updates, but I think there will be a little bit more change coming from that. So I think that's going to be mainly where it heads. I'm sure there'll be more sort of spam updates and things that come throughout next year as well. But I think, yeah, in terms of where it's heading, a lot to do with sort of more machine learning, and yeah, in terms of just improving content and around user intent. So yeah, brilliant. And then last and final question we've got is there any tips you've got to keep up with Google algorithm updates?
So that's a good question. Obviously, okay. So going based on what I just said a second ago, I think what my biggest tip to you going forward is there are some great tools for tracking what's happening with the algorithm across the board, right? You can look at, summer sensor. There's all, Moz has Mozcast. There's all these tools you can look at and see whether or not there's an update. I think as we're going toward a scenario where, again, like there's less these drastic spikes, the spikes are less drastic, it's more of continuous, and Google's sort of updating the algorithm in real time as opposed to pushing buttons manually. I think it's going to become more about you looking at your particular rankings, so what's happening across the board. And there are things you can do. Obviously, if you're tracking your rank, you can, for example, in SEMrush, you can connect your particular keywords that you're tracking to their sensor tool so you can see volatility for just your keywords. I think that's a good way to keep track going forward, as opposed to, there's a, Barry Schwartz at SE Roundtable put out a post today that there's been chatter about an algorithm update. At the same time, there's people out there who are really, really good at keeping up with these things. And I think one of the things that you want to do is, it's a mystery. We don't have, even Google doesn't understand the algorithm 100%. But when there's sort of a consensus of what's going on, then you can sort of say, you know what, I think that's what's happening in the algorithm. So when you see Lily Ray or Glenn Gabe or Barry Schwartz or Marie Haynes or Dr. Pete from Oz saying very similar things about what's happening, what they're seeing, I think that's a great way to keep track of what's going on in the algorithm.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, just on top of that, if you are just starting out, I do recommend following multiple SEO experts. I wouldn't just go off of sort of one person because, as you say, no one knows exactly what's happening. So, if you are seeing multiple people that are all saying the same sort of thing, though, normally that does give you a little bit of an idea. But also keeping an eye on your own websites and your clients' websites and seeing how they're performing, because what affects one industry might not affect another. And what affects somebody's clients might not be affecting yours. So make sure that you're doing sort of real time and actually looking at your own data as well. But yeah, you should get quite a good idea from what multiple SEO experts are saying within the industry. So it's always recommended to sort of set it up on monitoring tools, and then, like I say, just keep an eye on what everyone's saying as well.
1,000,000%. I couldn't agree with that more.
Perfect. And yeah, that brings us to the end of this Twitter Spaces. So thank you everyone for joining and listening. And thank you very much, Mordy, for coming on as well.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. If there's anything else or any other questions anyone has, then I'm sure just tweet at us or give Mordy a tweet, and I'm sure we'll both be more than happy to answer. But yeah, appreciate your time, Mordy, and I'll speak to everyone soon.
Thanks so much.
Cheers. See you later.